Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Agriculture, SOA, Master of Science in Food Safety and Quality Management, MSCFSQM, MVP 009 Research Methodology, Block-1 Science and Scientific Approach, Unit-3 Concept and Variables, Formulation and Testing of Hypothesis, Unit-3 Concept and Variables, Formulation and Testing of Hypothesis. 3.0 Objectives. After going through this unit, you will be in a position to explain the meaning of terminologies like concept, construct, variables, and hypothesis in undertaking social research work, describe the different types of variables, formulate hypothesis related to a research problem for testing. 3.1 Introduction. You may recall that in the previous unit we discussed about the reviw of literature and developing theoretical orientation. In this unit, let us learn about formulation and testing of hypothesis. Before we discuss about hypothesis, there is a need to under different terminologies such as concept, construct and variables. 3.2 Concept, construct and variables. Concept. The simplest meaning of concept is the thought or an opinion or a mental image about a case. This happens through the process of deduction. Concepts are distinctive verbal symbols which have been given to the generalized ideas form the scientific perception of the society. The concepts are abstractions used by the scientists as building blocks for the development of propositions and theories that explain and predict phenomena. Every science develops its own concepts for communicating its finding. Mullay and Subrathnam, 1980. The concepts relevant to a theory of diffusion of innovations would include diffusion and innovations. Construct. According to Kurlinger, 1964, construct is a concept but has the added meaning of having been deliberately adopted for a special purpose. Adoption is a concept, an abstraction from the observation of people accepting new practices or not accepting new practices. As a scientific construct, the extension scientists have used adoption in two ways. First, it has entered into the theoretical scheme and adoption of farm innovations, and therefore it is also related to other constructs such as innovation, education, etc. Secondly, adoption is defined in such a way that it can be observed and measured. Kurlinger, 1964. Concepts will have a common cultural meaning. The roles of concept are as follows. I. Concepts simplify our thinking. They give some connection between similar thoughts. 2. It facilitates better communication. 3. It provides a framework of observations, each new class of data isolated for other classes of data on the basis of definite characteristics is given a name concept. It is the higher level of abstraction. This process of higher level of abstraction based on the available raw data is conceptualistic. Variable. A variable is an attribute which may take different values. Thus, a variable is any value, attribute, which is changeable of which different values can be assigned in different situations. For example, the variable sake consists at two attributes, namely male and female. Any attribute subjected to change is a variable. There are different types of variables in social research, and you will understand this terminology much better when you come across with the different types of variables. 3.3 Types of variables. The variables can be classified as follows. 1. Independent variable and dependent variable. 2. Active variable and attribute variable. 3. Continuous variable and categorical variable. Let us see one by one. 3.3.1 Independent variable and dependent variable. Dependent variable is the one about which the experimenter or researcher makes predictions. Independent variable is the presumed cause of dependent variable, the presumed effect. The independent variable is the antecedent and dependent variable is the consequent. Kurlinger, 1964. Explain if X is the independent variable and Y is the dependent variable, Y changes in relation to X. If Y is adoption rate and X is knowledge, we can conclude level of knowledge affects adoption rate. Independent variable is the one which is manipulated, measured or selected by the researchers. Example, effect of extension methods on farmers' knowledge. Here farmers' knowledge is dependent variable and extension methods are independent variables. 3.3.2 Active and attribute variables. Attribute variables are qualitative variables that can only be measured but not manipulated. The human characteristics such as intelligence, socioeconomic status, sex, etc. One examples of attribute variables. Active variable is one which can be manipulated. The fertilizer dose is an example of active variable which can be manipulated. Literature leadership style is also an example of active variable, continuous and categorical variable. According to Kurlinger, 1964, a continuous variable is capable of taking in an ordered set of values neither a certain range. Adoption of farming practices is an example of continuous variable. Categorical variables belong to nominal measurement. According to Kurlinger, 1964, to categories means to assign an object to a subclass and subject of a class and the basis of the objects having or not having the characteristics that defines the subset. An example of dichotomous categorical variable is sex, male and female. 3.4 Hypothesis. This tentative explanation or solution, the validity of which is still to be tested, is called the hypothesis. Hypo means less than and thesis means generally held view. The formulation of the hypothesis is a central step in good research and it is important to give it a great deal of thought. There is little doubt that hypotheses are indispensable tools of scientific research and in absence of a proper or suitable hypothesis, a lot of time and labor of the researcher will be wasted in fruitless research. Any hypothesis is a testable statement of the relationship between the variables under study. Example, if A is dash 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 dash, then B is dash 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 dash. If the farmer is educated, he is an adopter. Here A condition is the antecedent condition and B is the consequent condition. These are in the form of a proposition. According to Lundberg, 1942, a hypothesis is a tentative generalization, the validity of which remains to be tested. In its most elementary stage, the hypothesis may be a hunch, guess, imaginative idea, which becomes the basis for action or investigation. According to Kurlinger, hypothesis is a conjectural of the relation between 2 and 3 variables. In formulating a hypothesis, the researcher generally does not start from scratch. There are several sources of information which help you in its development. These are as follows: existing theory related to the proposed problem, previous reports of research dealing with such problem, beliefs of others who have knowledge about the problem, one's own beliefs and insights about the problem. 3.5 Types and forms of hypothesis. Hypotheses are of two types, namely descriptive and relational. Descriptive hypotheses are those propositions which tentatively state the existence, size, form or distribution of some variable, subject to verification by research. Example, the current unemployment rate in Rajasthan exceeds 20% of its workforce is a descriptive hypothesis about the size and extent of unemployment in the state. Relational hypotheses are those propositions which state the relationship between two variables. Example, farm families with higher income spend more on recreation. There always exist two variables, thus relational hypothesis specifies the cause nature of relationship among the variable. 3.5.1 Null hypothesis. A hypothesis in research is generally expressed in the form of a null hypothesis. It is a hypothesis of no difference. Researcher has the sole purpose of rejecting it. Its aim is to state the relationship between the variables is due to chance factor and it does not reflect in the real result. It is also known as statistical hypothesis. 3.5.2 Alternative hypothesis. This is opposite of null hypothesis. It is the operational statement of the experimenter's research hypothesis. The research hypothesis is the prediction derived for the theory under test. If null hypothesis is rejected, alternative hypothesis is accepted. Example, small farmers differ significantly from large farmers in their adoption behavior. It is a research hypothesis. Null hypothesis is that there is no significant difference between these two farmers. Alternative hypothesis is that they differ significantly. 3.6 Characteristics, function and testing of hypotheses. 3.6.1 The criteria of a good hypothesis. 1. It should be with conceptual clarity. 2. It should be operationally defined. 3. It should be testable. 4. It should be economical. 5. It should be related to the existing theory of relationships. 6. It should be laid to available scientific tools and techniques. 3.6.2 The utilities of hypothesis. 1. It gives the point of inquiry. 2. It helps in deciding the direction to proceed. 3. It helps in selecting pertinent relevant facts. 4. It helps in drawing specific conclusions. 5. It enriches the theory. Testing the hypothesis. A hypothesis testing is determination of whether the expectations that a hypothesis represents are found to exist and the real world. Babi, 1983. This calls for survey to collect appropriate data. It is important to keep data that looks bad. Many experiments have been sabotaged by researchers throwing out data that didn't agree with preconceptions. Keep all of the data. You can make notes if something exceptional occurred when a particular data point was taken. Also, it is a good idea to write down observations related to your experiment that aren't directly related to the hypothesis. These observations could include variables over which you have no control, such as humidity, temperature, vibrations, etc., or any noteworthy happenings. Accept or reject the hypothesis. For many experiments, conclusions are formed based on informal analysis of the data. Simply asking, does the data fit the hypothesis, is one way to accept or reject a hypothesis. However, it is better to apply a statistical analysis to data to establish a degree of acceptance or rejection. Mathematics is also useful in assessing the effects of measurement errors and other uncertainties in an experiment. Accepting the hypothesis. Accepting a hypothesis does not guarantee that it is the correct hypothesis. This only means that the results of your experiment support the hypothesis. It is still possible to duplicate the experiment and get different results next time. It is also possible to have a hypothesis that explains the observations, yet is the incorrect explanation. Remember, a hypothesis can be disproven, but never proven. Rejecting hypothesis. If the null hypothesis was rejected, that may be as far as your experiment needs to go. If any other hypothesis was rejected, then it is time to reconsider your explanation for your observations. At least you won't be starting from scratch. You have more observations and data than ever before. I will explain the testing of hypotheses with another example. Suppose on the basis of certain social theory, we predict the two specified groups of people differ in the amount of time they spend in reading newspapers. This prediction would be our research hypothesis. Confirmation of this prediction would lend support to the social theory from which it is derived. To test this research hypothesis, we state in operational form as the alternative hypothesis that the mean amount of time spent in reading newspapers by the members of the two populations is unequal. Null hypothesis would be that the mean amount of time spent in reading newspapers by the members of the two populations is the same. If the data permits us to reject the null hypothesis, then the alternative hypothesis can be accepted, and this would support the research hypothesis. By testing these hypotheses, we make predictions by accepting or rejecting the hypothesis as final result of the research. 3.7 Summary. We have seen what it actually means by the terminologies like concept, construct, and variable and their relevance to social science. The mental image about a case is concept together with concepts. When we get our own perception, it becomes a construct. I.e. Construct is the sum of concept and percept. Any attribute subjected to change is a variable. There are dependent and independent variables in social research. We have seen active and attribute variables and continuous and categorical variables with examples. This tentative explanation or solution to the research problem, the validity of which is to be tested, is called the hypothesis. The hypothesis of no difference where the researcher has the sole purpose of rejecting it is called null hypothesis. The operational statement of the experimenter's research hypothesis, which is the prediction derived for the theory under test, is the alternative hypothesis. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with next chapter.